Hotel work is difficult and demanding at the best of times, but when you find yourself working at worst hotel, then it's a job that most of us simply couldn't handle. Time once again to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. Okay, first of all, I learned that if I leave my laptop sitting out with a file open, that certain roommates who think I have a limited vocabulary sneak in little changes while I'm not looking to make me sound more eloquentated. Well, I appreciate the gesture, but it makes me feel like they think I'm simple or something. Just because I've got a little gambling problem, don't mean I'm stupid. So this time, I'm going to use big words without anyone's help. Not even one of those dinosaurus books. So, after I get the rundown on the weird brass-looking bar thing, Leslie escorts me out of my room and back to the elevator. Once we exit on the 8th floor, he walks me over to the room marked with a number 1. Okay, this is a custodial nexus for this floor, he explained. You take your number 1 key like this and unlock the door. We then entered the room and I was shown over to another door on the far side that had a large panel of keyholes numbered 2 to 260. Pointing to the panel, he spoke again. This is your room directory. Put your number 1 key into the keyhole of the room you need to go to, and then open the door. Oh, remember to take your key in with you, otherwise, when you leave the room, you'll have to walk all the way back from whatever room you were in at the time. But as long as you have the key, when you open the door, it'll bring you back to the custodial nexus, he continued. He then showed me a large whiteboard covered in names and numbers. This is where you'll find your room assignments once you get them. They change from day to day based on who's on non-custodial duty at any given time, so be sure to always check it. Room work is pretty standard, he said, turning me the other direction to face shelves of fresh sheets, towels, cleaning supplies, trash bags, carts, and so on. Just load up your cart like so, change the sheets, blankets, and pillowcases, give the bathroom a wipe down, vacuum, dust, take care of any small things you notice, and you're all set. Then you bring the dirty crap back here and drop it down the laundry chutes. Sound easy enough? He asked, once finished. Yeah, I guess. That still doesn't explain why I need this crazy police baton from hell, though, I said, gesturing to the metal bar on my belt. Yeah, that's coming up next. Now that you know what to do up here, we go down to Mr. Giggles' fun time room, he answered. Is that really what it's called? I asked, seeing the name printed over the entrance to the room. Oh, I thought you were screwing with me. Yeah, but that's just to soften the blow of being one of the worst experiences of your life, he replied, before suddenly shoving me in and slamming the door behind me. I looked around for a second to take in my new surroundings, Leslie's words echoing in my brain. The first thing I noticed was how plain the room was. It was very clean, almost, immaculate. It was spotless, but practically empty. Then I realized the floor was covered in padded gym-type mats from one side to the other. Welcome, friend. A strange voice snaked across the room from an unseen source. Where are you? How are you hiding in here? I asked the voice. The voice answered back. I was not aware that standing behind someone counts as hiding. I spun around on my heel as fast as I could, but I wasn't prepared for what I saw, or, what I didn't see, I guess. I don't know. It's still pretty hard to explain. It had the basic form of a human. You might even say a man, but within that outline was just absence. No light, no shapes, no dimension, nothing. You can't really appreciate it without seeing it for yourself. It was difficult to even look at. It wasn't like empty space, but more like the thing's appearance was based on information human eyes aren't able to detect, so my eyes couldn't see in that specific area. I was basically looking into blindness in the shape of a man. My eyes started to hurt, so I turned away and sat on the padded floor. Mr. Giggles, I presume. Oh, I do ever so hate that. It's Giggles, but the staff have given me that awful nickname, he responded. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Giggles, I said. "It's quite all right, young man," the entity known as Mr. Giggles replied in his ethereal voice. "How shall we begin your training? We have a very long way to go. Many months before the door will open again." "Yeah, I guess. Well, wait. What do you mean, months?" I barked as I stood to face him. "Oh, do not worry. You will have everything you require in here, and for those outside it shall only seem to have been but a moment between when you enter and when you exit. And by the time you leave, you will be among the ranks of the finest warriors on the face of the earth," he tried to explain. So, after pitching another legendary shit fit, it was explained to me that the entity I was sequestered with, was responsible for training the hotel staff in the use of this weird weapon stick thing that they just called a cudgel. Once you get the hang of it, you can pretty much change it into any kind of weapon you need at the time, or just prefer. We were about to spend the better part of a year, or so I was led to believe, giving me the works on how to use as many variations of that thing as possible, and even how to fight without it. But even through all that, I never got a straight answer as to why. Well, I lost track of time in that place. No days or nights. Food would just show up and disappear. Every now and then I'd get new clothes after my old ones started to fall apart on my body. There was a shit bucket, but I'd rather not talk about the shit bucket. I did learn that I had a rare talent for splitting the cudgel in half and turning one half into a sword and the other half into a shield. Apparently there's only one other member in Cluster 8 that can even do that. I always liked that movie Troy, and fighting with a short sword and a shield made me feel like Achilles, so I kind of formed a preference for that. The training was miserable, however. My waking hours that weren't dedicated to drills or repetitive motions or physical fitness were allotted to sparring with Mr. Giggles that increased in intensity until, by the end, I felt as though each session was for a real struggle for my life. My countless injuries were treated with strange and potent balms and medicines that healed me in hours. I knew nothing but combat for what quickly became an innumerable amount of days. I felt my sanity beginning to slip away, and then, all at once, without any warning, the door suddenly creaked open, allowing the hall lights from outside to shine in. I slowly edged my way out. Damn, man. Mr. Giggles must have really seen something in you. You were in there for like 3 whole seconds. God, I've never even heard of that. I was only in there for like 1, maybe 1.5. Damn, that must have been brutal. I heard Leslie speak to me. I turned and had to give my mind time to readjust to seeing actual shapes and colors within a human profile. After that, I slowly walked over to him, took both hands and grabbed the collar of his shirt, and pulled his face close to mine as I took a deep breath. "Ah!" I screamed into his face at the top of my lungs, the infinite hours of pent-up insanity all pouring out at once. "He prefers Mr. Giggles," I said softly before pushing him away. "Boy, you really were in there for a while, weren't you? All right, now that's out of the way. Time to take you to see the manager," he said, and began leading me down another hall. A few minutes later, we were at the door of the manager's office. This is the kind of experience you never, ever forget, no matter how messed up in the head you were at the time. "Okay, I'm going to take off back to the main desk and try and get some work done, so you just knock and enter when you're told to. You might want to mind your manners in there," Leslie cautioned. It didn't take long to understand why. As he turned and walked back the way we came, I reached out to give a few raps on the door, but before I could, "Come in," sounded through the wood. It was an old voice, like what you'd expect a grandfather who's also a lumberjack to have, soft and stern, aged and wise. I felt a tingle of reverence run down my spine before I even turned the knob. As I entered, I noticed that this room looked very much like a normal everyday office you'd see at any hotel. Finally, some normalcy, you might think. But then I noticed that I was again seemingly alone. until the far wall behind the desk literally molded into a vaguely human shape, taking a seat at the desk as it did. "Please, Travis, come have a seat, my boy," the wall said, gesturing to the chair on the opposite side of the desk. "I'm sure you have a lot of questions," the strange entity protruding from the wall spoke. Yeah, but the wall thing in the room, I was in there so long, kind of forgot what they were," I answered quietly as I looked around the room for my seat. "Oh, yes. Don't worry. It takes a few hours, but most of the memory of the time spent in there will fade away before long. It seemed like a mere dream," the manager explained. "Oh, okay," I mumbled, noticing that I was still tightly grasping the cudgel. I'd gotten used to keeping it ready to fend off Mr. Giggles' surprise attacks. I got to where I could take the thing from a solid bar to a sword and shield in about half a second and be ready to fight. Come. No need for that in here," the manager said, noticing me fiddling with it in my hand. "Okay," I repeated, sliding it back into its pouch for the first time in what felt like ages. "I suppose you're wondering what all of this is," he said, gesturing around in a broad motion. "Well, to put it as plainly as possible, it's me. Yep, me. I am the hotel. I'm also responsible for the initiation of the various dimensions that this hotel connects." Wait, wouldn't that make you like God or something?" I asked as a sensation I still can't adequately describe washed over me. Yes and no. If you mean in the biblical sense, then very much no. If you mean as the catalyst for the thing you know as the universe, then I'm afraid so. But please, try not to think of me that way. There are many different beings native to many of the various dimensions that call themselves gods, yours included. And yes, even that one in the Bible. I must admit I'm not overly fond of that one myself. But as it stands, I only have my staff intervene in issues that involve a being from one dimension causing problems in another that they aren't native to, he explained. "So, wait, if you're God, does that make me an angel? Am I dead?" I yelled, leaping up from my chair. Sit down. You aren't dead and you're hardly anything close to an angel, he said. "Though if you do ever run into one, do be a dear and get rid of it for me. Awful, arrogant, meddlesome things they are. That cudgel can kill anything in any dimension. Make the metal myself, so you can bet the farm on it. And I believe after spending, oh my goodness, 5 years with Mr. Giggles. Oh dear, you poor boy," the manager said, standing from his chair and placing a hand on my shoulder, causing a mixture of excitement, nausea, and reverence to all wash over me at once. You go back to your room. He knows better than to keep someone for that long. Get some rest and come back tomorrow. We'll talk some more, okay?" Yeah, I think I'll do that," I replied, stirring back to my feet and making for the door. As I passed the hall that leads to the front desk on the way back to the common room, I could hear a commotion in the distance. It sounded like screams. I took off full speed down the hall to investigate. I slid to a halt as I ran head first into a nightmare. Strange, giant, insect, spider-like creatures were scuttling everywhere. Suddenly I heard a massive whoosh and felt a wave of heat from my left. Leslie was wearing an actual flamethrower and was blasting fire up and down the walls, scorching the bug things as he went. Every puff of flame sent more of the monstrosity shrieking and scurrying for dear life in their final moments. In a flash, something lunged at me, knocking me down to the floor. As soon as my ass hit the ground, one of those things took off full speed straight towards me with an ear-splitting cry. I recoiled and covered my face, ready for the sharp, pointy legs to grab hold of me. But before I could, I heard an earth-shattering smash that felt the ground lurch beneath me a little. I opened my eyes to see that Pete had crushed the bug into a million bloody pieces with a gigantic mallet. Then, in one motion, he snatched the hammer from the massive crater in the floor and swung for my head. I jumped sideways as the mallet slammed into the wall behind me, causing a sharp squeak from the creature it had just obliterated. "Welcome to Thunderdome, bitch," he said with his trademark slimy grin, before prying his hammer from the wall and continuing on his bug-smashing rampage across the main lobby. By the time I got back to my room, the thoughts in my head had plenty of time to swirl into a hurricane of frustration. I snatched open the door and started to yank and pull at my tattered staff shirt. 5 years. 5 freaking years in that room with that walking headache monster, and I couldn't even kill a bug, I exclaimed, throwing my staff shirt across the room in anger. "It takes some time," a voice from behind me said. "Oh, jeez. Oh, you're here," I said to my roommate, who had all but faded from my memory over the last 5 years. "Sorry, didn't realize you were in here." "It's okay, Travis. It takes time for the memories from the time in the room to fade and the memories from before to take their place. You were in there for longer than anyone, so I've heard. It may take longer for you, but, well, it will happen. We've all gone through this, I promise," she said. "Oh, boy, I'm actually glad to see you again," I said to the porcelain white being I shared a room with. I was beginning to remember our talk. It began to feel more like last night again and less like years ago. "So, just have to wait for all that stuff to kick in?" I asked. "Yes. Before long, everything you learned and practiced in the room will come back to you," she answered. I sat down on the bed next to her, resting my head in my hands and running my fingers through my hair as I spoke. Oh boy. First day on the job and I'm already 5 years into the job. Well, ain't that some shit? Which caused my roommate to laugh loudly in response. "Yes, this is a very different place, but I'll help you through," she said, taking my hand in hers. I didn't notice at first, but that moment was when I realized, she's kind of pretty. I felt a sharp pain against my temple as the sound of metal clanging on the door rattled across the small room. "You left your one key in the fun time room, jackass," Sasha, the she-beast, barked at me from the door before storming off. "Yeah, fuck you very much," I replied. "What was that?" she exclaimed, poking her head back around the corner. Thanks for bringing the key back. Appreciate it," I stammered. "Oh, leave him alone, Sasha. He just spent 5 years in there," my roommate scolded. The woman-shaped ball of attitude mumbled, squinting her eyes at me before retreating back down the hall. I think I'm going to take a shower. Haven't had one in forever. I've been taking sponge baths for the last... No, I had one the other day. No, hold on. I trailed off, trying to square away whether my last shower was a few years ago or a few days ago. See? It's already happening. Your memory's fixing itself, my roommate said excitedly. "Yeah, guess so," I replied. "Maybe the shower will help." "Yeah, what a good idea. I was just planning to take one as well," she said. "Oh, also, my name's Ina." Right, yeah. "Travis," I said, smiling. A smile that faded the instant I remembered the bathhouse was co-ed. A heatwave washed over me that made me feel like I'd just stuck my face in an oven. It took me several minutes to even start to bathe, on account of most of my focus being devoted to keeping my eyes aimed at the floor and off of the nudity that presented itself in an abundance of various strange forms all over the bathhouse. Oh, you don't even want to know what some of them have got, and yep, for all the nosy little perverts out there, I did sneak a peek at Ina, and I was admittedly somewhat relieved that she's really similar to your average human female. In general appearance, that is. I couldn't say for sure if the hardware matched up. Okay, keep it in your pants, sickos. The next morning, as I got dressed for my first day on the job, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to the sight of Leslie again. "You're going to the library today," he chirped. "What library?" I yawned in response. "Oh, you'll see," he answered with a smirk. "You're going to be an escort for one of the travelers. All you got to do is keep him safe and make sure that not a single book leaves that place. Simple enough, right?" Yeah, sure," I said, stifling another yawn. I was then led to an elevator door that was situated not too far from the manager's office. Waiting in front of the door was a man, based on appearances, but I started getting a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach the second I laid eyes on him. Dressed in all black, he wore an old-timey flat-brim hat and dark glasses with those old-school round lenses. The hem of his long black coat hovered just over the ground next to his glossy black shoes. As I got closer, I could tell that he was pale as a ghost and slim beneath his clothes. "Hey, how you doing?" I said, forcing myself to extend my hand to introduce myself. "Oh, I'm sure the pleasure's all mine," the man said sarcastically, refusing my gesture. The man's acidic voice oozed through the air. I wanted to be mad at the guy, but I was too busy being caught up on his voice. It sounded deep and kind of foreign, like if Alan Rickman had a sore throat or something. "Damn, guy, that's some voice you got there. Bet you could make a killing on audiobooks," I said before thinking, causing Leslie to slap me on the shoulder. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. "Oh, shit, my bad," I replied. "Either way, you'll be accompanying our guest while he visits the library," he added, pointing towards the door the man stood in front of. "Now, try to behave." "Are you trying to tell me this guy can't find his way around a damn books a million?" I asked, agitation now apparent in my voice. "This ain't no bookstore, buddy. And aside from it making the library at Alexandria look like a scholastic book fair, not a single book is allowed to leave that place. Not ever. The guest can take notes or copy information, but not a single book leaves. Aside from keeping an eye on the guest, you're also there to act as a bodyguard in the, more isolated regions," Leslie explained. No more talking. Look, he's waited on you and your bullshit long enough," he continued, slapping the only button next to the elevator, which showed a crude image of a book. The door dinged as it parted. I entered after the strange man. He then reached out and pressed a button identical to the one on the outside, causing the doors to close and the elevator to descend. After about a minute, I noticed that the bottom of the elevator began to drop down to pass a border of some kind. Turns out the inside doors were glass, and once you pass a certain point you get to see the library. And you really need this view to truly appreciate this place. By the time we were able to see through the glass, we were what had to be no less than 1,000 feet deep. The elevator is built into one of the colossal natural stone columns that descended from the ceiling to the ground below. As I looked down on the library, I almost fell to my knees. Not from the vertigo like you expect, but, no. What almost made me drop was not just the fact that I was looking out into an underground library that seemingly had no end. Not just that, but that I slowly started to notice that the patches of light began to define themselves as we got closer. They were cities. Small buildings and housings, all kinds of infrastructure, roads and bridges and other shit. Entire cities separated from one another by expanses of darkness in a second world of endless night. Pressing my hand against the glass for a better look, I let a single sentence escape my lips. "Oh my God," I whispered. "I remember my first time seeing it," the man spoke from behind me, damn near causing me to piss myself. I'd forgotten he was in there with me, and that Dracula voice didn't help. Once we hit the bottom and stepped out, the real shocker hit me. Everything was a library. I mean, everything. The sides of the buildings and houses were all shelves covered top to bottom in books of every shape, size, and color. The public benches, bookshelves. The bases of statues, bookshelves. The goddamn trees, bookshelves. The actual tree trunks grew in the shape of bookshelves and were all covered in the damn things. And people, well, when I say people, I mean all kinds of people. Like the ones back up top in the hotel people. Anyway, people were just walking around like this was normal. Well, of course, some of them looked like they were made of vapor, and some were literally glowing, so take the word normal with a grain of salt. This is supposedly the only place where people from all the different clusters can coexist in their natural states, the shady man next to me mentioned. The rumor even says the manager had to bind himself to the hotel to make this place. If he ever left, I imagine this place would fall into turmoil and chaos almost immediately. The man spoke again. Now, no time to waste. Long trip ahead of us, he added, pulling a map from his coat and beginning to walk. We stopped by a small shop first and bought packs and a considerable amount of supplies with some coins in a small bag Leslie had handed me, before we headed into the seemingly endless labyrinth of bookshelves. And when I say bookshelves, I mean they are similar to the structures in the town, but more crude. Stone shelves rose from the ground stories high alongside more of the mysterious book trees. I even spotted old scrolls and tablets from time to time. The deeper we traveled, the fewer and fewer people we crossed paths with. Occasionally I would see a person appear heading the opposite direction back into town, pulling an empty wagon. Seeing as when we left we were accompanied for a short time by several others pulling carts of their own books, I assumed they were workers whose job was to take new additions to the library to their proper place. Once I realized this, the haggard and scarred appearance they all shared brought me no ease at all. Each one of them looked more like gladiators than librarians, some even wearing armor. I even saw one missing a leg that had been replaced with a prosthetic, a fake one made of wood carved into the shape of the leg that used to be there. Jesus, what the hell goes on in this place? I asked the man, but got no response. We walked and walked and walked, until we finally settled down and made camp for not exactly the night, because it's always the same, and once you reach a certain point, the light of the town fades, and you're left with just the glow of the few natural lights that grow from the tree trunks and whatever light source you brought with you. Luckily, our lamps were bright enough to set our half-assed camp by. The first time we stopped, I'd had the thought to read some of the books that surrounded me, but I couldn't even find one in a language I recognized, never mind one I could read. So that was the only time I attempted that. And it turns out the earpiece doesn't work on text. Bummer. Things started to get weird at the second stop. I know weird is very relative and subjective in this case, but you get what I'm saying. After we both laid down to sleep, I began to hear things. They sounded like chirps at first, like birds in the distance. But as time went on, they got closer and sounded a lot less like chirping. The sounds began to remind me more of someone screaming into a pillow very loudly and at a very high pitch. And now I started to freak out a bit. My holy shitometer maxed out when I began to notice the sounds were encircling us. I could hear scratching as whatever made them crawled over and around and through the bookshelves and trees and across the ground. I crawled over to the man in a panic. Hey, there's something around us in the dark, I whispered sharply, trying to shake him awake. Yes, I already know, the man answered, apparently already awake. Now be still and shut up, and they'll leave you alone. Or don't, and be dragged screaming and dying into the dark. I really absolutely could not care less either way, he said, rolling over on his side to face the direction opposite me. Why the fuck would you say that? You hateful mother... I started to say, but one of the muffled shrieks in the distance made me stop. I crawled slowly back to my pallet and wrapped myself in the blanket. I didn't sleep well at all. Once we packed up and began to walk again, against my better judgment, I started asking more questions. And boy, did I get answers. Granted, I think he was as bored as I was, or he would likely have told me to leave him alone. My first question was, obviously, what the hell were those things I'd heard? Short answer, basically alligator-sized, giant lizard jackal things that can run down a gazelle and change their skin like an octopus. Oh, also they're poisonous, or not poisonous. The one where they bite you and die. Not you bite them and you die. Yeah, that one. And they're part of the reason the hotel staff are sent to escort visitors. But, all things considered, this guy seemed more like he'd eat one of them than the other way round. Second question was, how the hell he even knew about this place? I wasn't really ready for the answer. Well, I used to work here, many, many years ago, he explained. I used to make those cudgels you're carrying on your hip right now. For real? You serious? I croaked. I mean, how long ago are we talking? Like, a year? Oh, who's to say? He pondered. Let's see. My brother James had just set sail for the States. He was a first mate, if I recall. Cornwallis had surrendered not too long before. Well, I remember having to put down my slaves before I left. Well, did you just say my slaves? Like you own people and put them down like animals? I barked in disgust. Well, of course. I worked them pretty hard and I couldn't sell them off. Nobody wants to pay good money for a worn-out slave. He said so casually, it made me physically ill. God, you're an appalling son of a bitch, aren't you? I hissed at his back. Now, let's not get off topic, he hummed. About the time I left, I believe the automobile was just coming into fashion. What a delightful uproar they caused. Nobody knew how to drive. No real laws or regulations. People dying in the streets left and right. Oh, you should have seen it, he finished with a chuckle. How the hell is that even possible? That was like hundreds of years ago, I asked Mr. Grand Wizard. Ah, well, you see, you don't age while you work at the hotel. One of the perks. You can stay and work there as long as you want and never lose a second of your precious little life, he answered. As long as that key is in your hand, you don't have to worry about dying of old age. Yeah, but that still doesn't explain why you're still here walking around. I mean, you look old, but you'd basically be a mummy by now, I stated, not fully registering that someone just told me I was basically Highlander. And normally that would be absolutely correct, and possibly the smartest thing you've said since we met. However, this is not my first pilgrimage through this place, he said, motioning his hand to our surroundings. I've spent an ample amount of time in this place learning little-known secrets of the universe, longevity being one of many. Anything I can to separate myself as far and completely as possible from the human condition. Jeez, guy. Most people just get some tattoos and some crazy piercings or something, I mumbled. So, what's your shady ass doing down here this time? Minding my own business, he said in an unnervingly sudden, threatening tone. After several days of mindless wandering with the constant sound of those jack alligator things following us the whole way, we finally came to another village. Ah, finally, the man sighed in relief. Is this where you were looking for? I asked. Indeed it is. This particular town is called Collector's Canyon. Many of the inhabitants here run small shops where they collect very specific, top-quality books from around the library and sell the opportunity to read them for a very steep price. Each shop usually deals in books of a specific subject. One shop might offer you a scientific breakthrough that could change the world, or another one might be where you can read the most terrifying horror stories ever written, or perhaps the greatest single mystery novel in hundreds of dimensions, he explained. Why so expensive, though? I mean, there's books out of the ass in this place, I asked. Yes, that's exactly why the service exists at all. Billions and billions of books and no means of categorization. There's no way for the average person to find what they're looking for in several lifetimes. These are professionals with closely guarded trade secrets on how to search for the very best books, he answered. Now, we are looking for a particular shop, which, according to this map, is this way. Hey, why is it called Collector's Canyon if there's no... I began to ask, but I was answered before I could finish. After walking past a few small houses, I was now looking out into a massive crack in the earth. I remember going to the Grand Canyon as a kid, and let me tell you, you could fit several of them in this thing. And what's more, from the canyon walls, there were what looked like sideways stalactites just jutting out far into the air. They were almost the size of skyscrapers, but even more amazing was they looked like they were hollowed out, little specks of light shining through what looked like windows. It took the man bumping into my shoulder as he walked by to bring me back to my senses. Following behind, I asked in astonishment, "Are you seeing this?" Oh, yes, very amazing," he murmured to himself as he checked the map once again. "We need to make our way to the bottom," my Bond villain of a ward directed. After some time, we finally reached the bottom and worked our way through to a small corner of the canyon wall. There we found a small shack of a shop situated just beneath the base of where one of those sideways stalactite things met the wall. I read the shop sign. Curses, mythology and science, theory and application. So, those of you that are new to this is part of a wider extended universe that began with the Werewolves Are Assholes series, includes this and other stories as well. So, if that makes no sense to you whatsoever, check the video description. There's a link to the playlist containing every episode of this universe so far, with more to come, no doubt. If you enjoyed this, I'm very glad to hear it. If you're new to it and it didn't make any sense, go check that playlist and listen from the beginning. Quite a lot of stories there for you. Several hours worth, if you're interested. And if you've listened to them already, go back and listen to them again. Alright? Because you've probably forgotten a lot of the details and they are all interconnected. Well, enough for me on this fine Sunday. Of course, I will be back to you again tomorrow. Not sure where, not sure when, as I'm travelling back from Turkey to the Netherlands. But there will be something for you, my dear friends. So until then, sweet dreams and bye-bye. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time listening to me. Now, if you enjoyed the Dr. Creepen experience, then come find me on Facebook. Come chat with me on Twitter. Listen to the background music and download it if you like on SoundCloud. Drop by the store, pick up a t-shirt. And, importantly, if you've got a story you'd like me to read, send it to Dr. Creepen's Vault, the subreddit I set up so that I could read your stories. Now, looking forward to seeing you all again real soon. So, come check me out, okay?